Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're reviewing our current competition game, Dune, Imperium, Uprising. We hold regular competitions here on the Lucky Roll channel for our subscribers, and if you check the link here in the corner, or even the description box below, you'll see how to enter our latest one. This is the sequel to Dune Imperium. However, I'd argue that it's more of a reimagination of the game set in the context of the second movie rather than a direct sequel. This, nevertheless, is not a bad thing, and not only is it a new and interesting take on the balance and mechanics of Dune Imperium, it is also compatible with the Dune Imperium game and its expansions, such as Rise of Z and Immortality, which is a real plus for fans of the game, as it gives you multiple ways to play. The game is 2 to 4 players if playing as an individual, or up to 6 players if playing in teams. The game is an interesting mix of worker placement, card drafting, deck building, and strategy set in the Dune universe. The Dune Imperium sequel, Uprising, is based on the Dune Part 2 movie and has a higher focus on combat and the really interesting addition of sandworms. The winner at the end of the game is the player or team with the most victory points. In the first Dune Imperium game, players won with a combination of victory points from faction influence and combat. It was a very keenly balanced game where victory points were stolen from other players if a rival increased in influence with the same faction. The games I played were predominantly very close, with a 10-round limit and finite scope to gather resources for combat due to the worker placement mechanic in the game. Dune Uprising has changed that with a much larger emphasis on combat, with sandworms doubling the victory point rewards for combat. A new mechanic of Chaum Charity, allowing players to accrue influence and resources in different ways. And finally, spies, allowing more freedom of movement and worker placement spaces, with players being able to engage troops and source more resources for combat much more readily. The bones of the game remain the same as Dune Imperium, but the extra emphasis on combat in Uprising shakes it up significantly. In Imperium, my playstyle was usually to concentrate on faction influence at the start of the game and then focus on combat for the latter part of the game, as the fine balance of Dune Imperium ensured that victory points were hard to come by. An interesting take on politicking and scheming that I really enjoyed and found very in tune with the feel of the first Dune movie. Dune Part 2, however, was much more of an action movie, and the Uprising game reflects that perfectly, especially with the addition of sandworms as a combat unit, doubling the potential reward in combat from 2 victory points to 4 victory points. A significant jump when 10 victory points are all that is needed to end the game. There's also the addition of battle icons in the conflict cards. When matched with others of their colour, they serve as an additional way to score victory points. A good inclusion, as there were conflicts in the original game for items such as currency or influence that players often ignored as the rewards were not significant enough. In Uprising, 2 matching battle icons are sufficient to warrant a victory point, so every conflict has a stake. The Chaum module is optional but serves as an interesting way to gain resources. There are no victory points in the Chaum module, but it serves as a great way to harvest extra resources such as water, money, and influence. So if you want an intense combat-filled game, it's a good module to include, as it will ensure ample opportunities for further resources for combat for the games ahead. Players can choose to infiltrate or gather intelligence if they have a spy in an observation post attached to a worker placement space. If they infiltrate, they can remove the spy to use the space with their own agent, even if it's occupied by another player. Or, if they choose to gather intelligence, they can remove the spy and draw a card. Now this is a new mechanic that's an especially hard adjustment to make if you're a veteran vanilla Dune Imperium player, as it's now all the more difficult to monopolize or block other players from specific spaces, or to deprive them from engaging in combat, or even to stop them acquiring resources such as water or spice. And it's even more difficult again if the chow mechanic is in play. The game also comes with additional tiles for the Rise of Z and Immortality expansions, which combine surprisingly well with the Dreadnoughts having a nice balancing factor to the Sandworm at times, and the technology spaces adding to the chow mechanics for extra resources. As for my personal feelings as to which game is better, Imperium or Uprising, that is honestly a hard question to answer. I utterly love Dune Imperium. Even without the expansions, I found it a near perfect balance of a game. The 2 expansions added immeasurably to it and really enhanced the play experience, and I always enjoyed the politicking and scheming of the game and found that it captured the vibe and atmosphere of both the movies and the novels perfectly, especially the first Dune film. The sequel, Dune Part 2, however, obviously took a step up in terms of action as opposed to just politicking, and the board game follows suit. I found it a difficult adjustment to go from my Dune Imperium mindset of scheming to the more directly action and combat orientated mindset needed for Dune Uprising. But nevertheless, I found it a change that was very reflective of the vibe and atmosphere of the second movie. Both games capture the respective movies they follow excellently, and I can see myself in the future after a subsequent watch in wanting to play the corresponding board game afterwards, be it Dune Imperium with the first Dune movie or Uprising with Dune Part 2. The change, though, is at times jarring, as I went from picking and choosing my moment to strike in combat with the first game to a near consistent combat engagement in the second. But that is a me problem in having played the first game way too much rather than the game design problem. It is both liberating and daunting, as the hard-honed strategies I developed with the first game are now largely irrelevant in the second. Despite being the same skeletal structure, design, and indeed universe, this feels at times like a completely different game. I dug myself into a rut with the first game, and the sequel is sufficiently refreshing enough that it's forcing me out of that rut, despite my best efforts. What is also interesting is a friend of mine by the name of Pavel is also a huge fan of the first game and has held off from playing the sequel for the same reason. He wants to get his full play value from the first game and become bored of it before delving and committing fully to the second. I suspect that his issue, however, is the same as mine, in that I have yet to become bored of the first game. So to come full circle, I don't consider one game better than the other, as both are excellent and capture the tone and atmosphere of the movies they are based upon excellently. Dune Parts 1 and 2 are 2 different movies, and thusly Dune Imperium and Uprising are 2 different games. In the Dune universe, spice is the source of space travel and the extension of life and consciousness. In the real world, variety is known as the spice of life. In the Direwolf Dune board games, the spice in question here is a combination of both, as the variety and offer here from both games set in the Dune universe is excellent. A must-buy if you're a fan of both the franchise and the first board game. Or, again, if you're one of our subscribers, check out our competition video here or even below in the description for a chance to win your very own copy of Dune Imperium Uprising. As always, this is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed these videos, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck, God bless, and stay safe.